folks, it's Jeff here. Just a quick reminder, if you're loving Disney Coast to Coast, there are a couple of easy ways that you can support the show. We'd love it if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or wherever you listen to the show. This is a simple way to help other Disney fans find us. Also, go ahead and share your favorite episodes on social media and be sure to tag us. You can find all of our social media information at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all of you who listen every week. Your support is very appreciated, and we love that you're enjoying our Disney geekiness. Now on with the show.
Get ready for your weekly dose of pixie dust with Disney Coast to Coast.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePaoli, and on today's show, I have a conversation with my dear friend David Kirschner, who you may know for his involvement with movies like An American Tail and the Child's Play series. But Disney fans most certainly know him as the creator and producer of the Halloween classic Hocus Pocus, celebrating its 25th anniversary this very month. Throughout David's varied career in show business, he has a lot of great stories to tell that I just know you're gonna love. So let's get to that conversation right now. David, welcome to the show. My goodness.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so you, of course, most Disney fans know you for your work on Hocus Pocus, but your work goes way before that, and you actually started as an illustrator and an artist. So was that kind of your first love, the whole illustration world? Or?
It was a mean to an ends. My dad died when I was very young. My mom was a secretary. We didn't have much at all and no connections. And I thought I would take my art and use that as a stepping stone towards what my ultimate goal was to write and produce fantasy.
Okay, so it worked.
It did.
It worked pretty...
I'm not sure if my kid ever came to me and said that I would say, yeah, I'd go for that. But yeah, it worked.
Yeah, it worked pretty well. And I saw that you actually did some illustration for some Muppet stuff back in the day.
I did. I started off on Sesame Street as an illustrator for product, everything from bed sheets to some of the very rudimentary children's books to just packaging on toys. And then it was very nice. Jim liked me and gave me a shot to come and do the same kind of thing on Muppets. And then I also started playing around with coming up with gags for the Muppet Show and would send them off to Jim.
So what year was this around?
This is about 1970, 78, 79.
Okay, and so you had a personal relationship with Jim Henson?
I did. My mom and I sent my portfolio off to him, something no one would ever do today because you have all this original art. But it was so innocent. It was so almost ridiculous because we just sent it off to him. And to the Muppet Mansion, which they referred to as Henson Associates, right near the Metropolitan Art Museum in New York. And it was this gorgeous, 5-story magnificent brownstone, and we sent it off to Jim, and Jim said he sent me a ticket and asked me to come to New York and to meet with him, and from there I started getting little assignments to do stuff for him, and then those grew.
That's incredible.
And he began my career. Spielberg made it happen, but Jim, I presented something called Rose Petal Place to him that I thought might be good for the Muppets, and he said, it's a little soft for us, but Hallmark is actually looking for something just like this. They just approached us. He said, would you like me to call for you? That was the kind of person that he was. Just like one of your friends when you're 10 years old. He was just someone that was just a kind, fun person to be with, very shy. And I am, but I certainly was then. But nonetheless, we just seemed to hit it off. And I certainly wasn't in his circle, but he made that call for me for Hallmark, and that call significantly changed my life and brought me to Spielberg's attention. So
I feel like you just described yourself, honestly, when you're like a very shy guy willing to pick up the phone and help other people. That's kind of incredible. You're kind of like passing on.
I guess so. I've been very fortunate with people that have been very patient with me and very nice and understanding, and saw something maybe at times more than I saw in myself.
That's incredible. So you said that he sent you a ticket. So where were you based at this point?
I paid for my ticket.
Okay.
But he invited me.
Okay.
I was based in my mom's house in Van Nuys, that she still lives in.
Okay.
Van Nuys, California, and that was the beginning of it.
Wow.
And then my wife went with me once a couple years later, and Jim's office was magnificent because in back of his desk there are about, I don't know, 8 feet or something by 3 feet, and they're stained glass panels of him with a monitor on, with his hand raised up in the air, with Kermit on one hand, and then on the other picture is Frank Oz, and he's got Miss Peggy, and those are above his desk and or in back of his desk and backlit, and on his mantle was a photograph of Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen, the first star ventriloquist, although he started on radio, and I'm not sure how anybody could be considered brilliant by that, but the photograph is magnificent, and it still gives me chills to this day. It's Edgar Bergen holding Charlie McCarthy, and Edgar wrote, "Dear Jim, keep the magic alive."
Wow.
Isn't that powerful?
And he certainly did, didn't
Yeah,
it?
he certainly did.
Jim Henson's one of those people, like, obviously I have great admiration for Walt Disney, but, like, Jim Henson's right up there for me. I just have so much respect for somebody creative who grew up with nothing, had no ins in the industry, and was like, I'm going to do it. And then they create an empire. And the Jim Henson Company to this day is still doing incredible things. And, of course, Disney now owns the Muppets,
Right.
which is really, really interesting how that all worked out. But I didn't realize you had such a strong connection to Jim Henson.
I did. Again, my dad had died when I was 14. So I think any older man that had a tiny bit of gray at their temples, I just wanted to please. It was so important to me to make them proud. It's very interesting when I look back on that. And Jim was no exception. And look, he had 7 kids. The last thing he needed was another kid. But he was so kind to me. And again, I wasn't in his circle of friends, but I certainly met amazing people like Brian Froud, who designed Dark Crystal and so many of the amazing characters. It was, these guys were my heroes.
So how long were you based in New York?
I wasn't based in New York.
Oh, okay.
I would just get my assignments and then I would send them in, which is still amazing because there were a million great artists there. But I think he just took a liking to this shy kid and I guess like the artwork, it was good enough anyway for him to say, let's try some stuff.
I love that you started like with the Sesame Street toy packaging and such, because it's one of those worlds that kind of like voiceover, people just see every day or experience every day, but don't think about, and don't have to think about, oh, somebody spent the time to draw this big bird on this toy package. It's not like there's just this library that just, that just gets pulled from all the time. So I think that's an incredible story that's how you started.
It's such a great way of looking at it.
Right?
Yeah, no, you're right.
It's nuts. But you also, your illustrations became useful for a big film for Disney, The Nightmare Before Christmas. You had a bit of work with that.
Yeah,
yes?
I mean, my contribution is small, and in the end, Tim did not use my design. For Zero the dog, I designed, I basically took a bed sheet and kind of threw it over one of our daughter's stuffed animals, and I'd had a cocker when I was a little boy, cocker spaniel, and that was my idea for Zero. Tim redesigned that and made Zero much more of a dachshund kind of design, but same sheet and the nose of like Rudolph. But again, he had his poetry, and I took that the nose idea from his poetry. But the worst was, and this will say so much about Tim Burton, Tim gave me all of his artwork that he had done to date, and I had a breakfast, and I remember I was in my Jeep Cherokee, and I pulled up, and being kind of the absent-minded professor, cliche artist, forgot to lock my doors. And I came back to my car, and all Tim Burton's artwork was gone. Gone. I cried. I mean, I thought, first that I so I'm sure was going to disappoint him, that he was going to be angry at me. My relationship with him was over. And he said, I have copies of everything, so don't worry about it. I hope I would react like that, but it just says the kind of person that he is.
Were those originals that you had, or were those
originals?
Oh my goodness!
My guess is somebody, because I parked right near a trash can, and there may have been a homeless person that was looking through trash, or kids. I used to do the same thing. I used to drive my bike up to Hanna-Barbera and go through the trash can, but the art wasn't in the trash can. It was in my car, and so I think someone just thought, look at that, and tried opening the car, and just like, oh my God, I can have all this artwork. I wonder if they ever realized what they had, but
I'm curious if any of that's ever ended up at auction or anything. I think that's incredible. One of these days, I hope you're at an auction and see something that you recognize. Oh my goodness, that must have been a heart sink moment.
It was a moment that made me say, time to grow up and be aware and lock your car door.
Oh, that's terrifying. You kind of touched on this a little bit. It's interesting to me that Tim Burton, who is a very visual guy and an illustrator himself and such, would, in fact, he worked on Fox and the Hound for Disney, and he worked for Walt Disney Animation for a while. But it's interesting to bring in an illustrator and an artist when you're somebody like Tim Burton. What's it like working with somebody who knows that craft so well?
Well, and, it was so young in my career, but Tim has such a particular style. It almost seems ridiculous to even say the words because everybody knows that. If you see an image of a black and white spiral, those always make their way somehow into a Tim Burton movie. Just his line, even his line quality has a personality that is Tim Burton. Most people's line quality is just as smooth as you can get it. Tim's has a personality that has a little waver to it, and it just adds to the characters so much. I think he so redefined the idea of another whole level of character design that I know it was enormously influential for me.
Yeah, are you familiar with the restaurant after his designs called Beetle House?
No.
It's down by the Pantages. I know it was supposed to be a limited run, but I went. It lasted at least a year. It may even still be there, but it's basically a Tim Burton inspired restaurant.
Oh my gosh.
And then it was actually really funny because when they brought out, they had like the Edward Scissor Burger or something like that. And when they bring out your burger, there's just a giant pair of scissors stabbed through the center of the burger.
Oh my God. That is...
It was a pretty cool presentation, and overall,
You're going to have to give me the address because I'm going to...
Oh, it's literally like right across the street from the Pantages, but I'll send you more info.
I think it's gone then.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, man. I went several months ago at this point, but...
Oh, really?
January, I think. It was when Aladdin was at the Pantages.
Yeah, and that's when we saw it too, but I didn't know that was there.
I shouldn't say directly across the street. It's very close to the Pantages.
All right. Well,
I'll send you info.
Okay, thank you.
We digress. Just curious, I'm assuming you're a fan of The Nightmare Before Christmas, as most Disney fans are.
I almost have to move my Disney fan side away from it. It's just so hardcore Tim Burton. Now, for me, the first thing I ever saw of Tim's was a wonderful short called Vincent, and then Frankenweenie, and I was in love with this guy. And when I had the opportunity, because we shared the same agent, and when Mike Simpson invited Liz and I, my wife and I, to dinner, and Tim sat right next to us, and we just hit it off. And so he would come to the house, and we spent time together. It was fun. It was a fun period.
So being said, well, I actually love the fact that not only is it like Disney, which is awesome, but it also, our favorite holiday is Halloween.
Favorite.
And it just works in so beautifully to that. So yeah, Nightmare Before Christmas is great. I'm just kind of curious, do you think there should be a sequel?
Oh God, I've never even thought of that. I guess if he's involved in a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's his mind is so amazing and staggering, and his show at the LA County Art Museum was great. Just to step inside the world of Tim Burton, or to be a Disneyland at Halloween time and to see what they do with the haunted house, which is his Nightmare. They turn it into Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's every year it gets better and better and better, and just thousands of people are wearing, clothing that says how much they love that property.
The thing I love about Haunted Mansion Holiday is, holiday layovers is nothing new when it comes to the theme park world, but I love the fact that because of the nature of Nightmare Before Christmas, it's both Halloween and Christmas, so they can do like a 4-month-long layover, which obviously means invest a lot more time and money into it, and so I think that that's such a great thing. I actually think it would be an interesting TV series if they ever wanted to, especially with the streaming service that Disney has coming up. I think I'd love to see more of Halloween Town, I think it would be interesting.
Right.
Although these days it would probably be done all CG and not stop motion the way it was.
Right.
Which,
well, I don't know if he would allow that. I think if Tim were involved, he would make sure that it is done exactly the same way that it's always done. And just forgot the director's name.
Selznick? No. Selznick?
No. Selick. Henry Selick. Very nice man. Very talented. He also did James and the Giant Peach for Disney. But just that imagination of Tim Burton's. I mean, I was one tiny artist with lots of people that worked with him, but it sure was life-changing for me just to even be in his company.
I remember seeing when I was a kid at Disney MGM Studios in the theme park. It was around the time that the film came out, and they had all the models from the movie. And it was so cool to see all of that stuff.
I wish I would have seen that.
I wonder where all that stuff is now. Maybe at archives. But I do want to get to An American Tail, which I know is not a Disney movie, and this is a Disney podcast. But I want to.
It could have been.
That's why I want to mention it, because we've spoken about how this was originally pitched to Disney.
It was. I originally presented it to Jeffrey Katzenberg, who had arrived at Disney in 1984, and my agents called and said that this kid, because I was that at that point, just finished a really successful project with Hallmark and the General Mills Toy Group, and now he has his next project. Jeffrey said, "Great, come in." So I went in there and I presented, I had a steamer trunk, and out of there I took maquettes of the Mousewitz family and all the other immigrant mice.
Which you created?
Which I created.
Nice.
And then artwork that I created. And Jeffrey looked at me and said, well, I'll clean this up. Who the F is going to see a film about a Jewish mouse? And I said, well, who's going to see a film about a wooden puppet? It's what you do with that character and where you take it. He said, nice.
Did you actually say that to him?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
And Jeffrey, very kindly, 2 weeks after the film came out, he wrote me a note saying, "Dear David, now I know who the F is going to go see a film about a Jewish mouse, Mazel Tov." It was, it's something that means a lot to me. I don't think, other than Steven Spielberg, I don't think anybody else would have made that project.
So how did it get to Spielberg?
Okay. There was an article on me in the LA Times, and it says, "Shy daydreamer brings his dream to life." And I got a call from a man named Dan Romanelli at Warner Brothers, who was head of all merchandising. And Dan came over and looked at it and said, "Have you ever met Spielberg?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you should." And I said, "Well, I feel the same way." He said, "I'm going to make it happen." And so I got a call from a woman that I had no idea who she was, named Kathy Kennedy. And she came to my office, and I presented An American Tail to her. She didn't laugh. She didn't cry. She didn't do anything. She just listened. And then she said, "Do you have a phone?" Because this is July 3rd, 1984. And we didn't have cell phones. Hard to believe. And she said, "Can I use your phone?" And I said, "Yes." And she called Stephen, and she said, "I just saw something, and you need to see this kid's work like now." And he said whatever he said on the other line, and she got off and said, "He's got an eye infection. He can't do it today. But tomorrow, he's having a 4th of July party. Why don't you and your wife come half an hour earlier, present this to him, and stay for the party?" I mean, it's kind of going from zero to ever being invited to, a so-called Hollywood party to being invited to a party at Spielberg's that you look over here and it's Harrison Ford and you look over there because this is around the time of the second Raiders. You've got Sean Connery and I think back on it, Jeffrey Katzenberg was there with his wife and children, and his son now is an amazing director that does the great show The Goldbergs, and produced It also for Warner's. But I just remember this little 2-year-old boy, and anyway, so from there it was one of the great moments, other than my wife telling me she loved me, the birth of my children and grandchildren. But when Stephen said to me, "What excites me more than what I see before me is what you still have up there," pointing to my head, and how that's going to mature as you grow. And he said, "Let's make a movie." And it has never been as easy as that one moment when Steven Spielberg said, "Let's make a movie," because that's what happened. Immediately we began to make a movie. And, writers were brought in for the screenplay based on my story, and Don Bluth was brought in to direct it, and it was incredibly exciting, and I will never forget that moment for the rest of my life.
Where did Fievel come from for you?
Fievel came from my family's history. My family came from a combination of Russia and Ireland, and my wife's parents were survivors of the concentration camps, and it was just important to me that my children have an opportunity to know their story, but from the point of view of something that would engage children, which in this case were mice. I had gone to kindergarten with a girl who had the last name of Moskowitz, and I always thought it sounded like Mouskowitz. So from the time I was 5 years old, I held on to that, wow. and the family became the Mouskowitz family, and then there were Irish mice families, Italian mice families, Spanish mice families, Asian mice families, black mice families that were coming from the world over, and I just kind of weaved that through the course of the world of this microcosm of our own immigration system.
It's incredible. Wow, it's really funny because I think people who live outside of Hollywood, like, you talk about how difficult it is to make a movie, but you think certain people are exempt from that. And having been here long enough, there are so few, like that Spielberg situation where you're like, let's make a movie and it gets done. Yeah. There are so many things that can go wrong, and most often do.
Right. Apps or someone's that said that to you is then fired the next week.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. That's incredible. But let's get to the film that... correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the one you hold most near and dear to your heart, and that's Hocus Pocus.
To whatever degree I love them all, I wouldn't have attempted to make them, or in a lot of cases create them, had I not. But because I love Halloween so much, because this is a story that I wrote for our two daughters when they were about, 3 and 5, it was a spooky story for them, for sure. It was a bedtime story, which, of course, they wound up sleeping with us. But it just came from such a place of love, of living for Halloween when I was a little kid, that it just spoke to me the same way it does today at 63. And, the combination of Kenny Ortega directing it, who just made it one of the very best experiences that I've ever had in my life. It was just the kindest, gentlest soul, aside from his great creativity. It was just amazing just to even be a part of that.
So you mentioned that this was a story you told to your children. And was that, I guess you were a producer, so the intention whenever you have an idea for a story is probably, hey, this could probably become something more.
I would love to say that was the case there. It really was a story for them that once I really had it down, I thought, wow, this is a nice little story. But I really didn't think about it until, and maybe it was even my wife that said, you should do something with this. That's usually her that says that. She's much more responsible than I am. I wish I could go back and remember exactly. I don't. But I just, when Jeffrey passed on An American Tail, he asked if I had anything else. And I said that there was a story that I had written for my daughters about Halloween. I said, but I have a whole presentation for it. And he said, well, I don't need a whole show and tell. And I said, well, and, very shyly, but I said, you kind of do, because it's my world, and I want you to step into my head to at least see what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And so we made an appointment, and I decorated the conference room, and I had two witches' brooms hanging on monofilament wire. And then I had someone that knew how to do these things, because I don't, take out the motor of an Electrolux vacuum cleaner so that I could hang it from the ceiling without the whole ceiling caving in. And then Liz and I took some Ralph's bags, and Liz had all the kids in the neighborhood draw ghosts and witches and black cats on this Ralph's bag. And then Liz bought 20 pounds of candy corn. And I ripped the bottom of the bag, so it had all the designs on it, but it was like a Halloween bag, trick-or-treat bag. And then I made kind of a serpentine design out of the candy corn, kind of spilling out of the bottom of the bag like it had ripped, and sat the guys down right there. And they smelled their childhood. They smelled Halloween. And I said to them, Halloween is approaching almost $1 billion industry. Today, it's over 10 billion. But when I said it in those terms, I think more than anything creative, that's what made them sit up and say, whoa,
yeah,
that's very interesting. And here was a story of kids that let the genie out of the bottle, so to speak, on Halloween night, and they have to get the genie, the evil genies in this case, back in the bottle before all hell breaks loose, literally.
So you played with their senses with the smell of the candy corn. Did you or did you not bring in dried leaves as well?
I did not have dried leaves.
Okay.
That would have been good. Where were you? But you weren't born. But I did have dry ice in a big cauldron. And then I had my artwork all around the room, of what, the witch's house, which would change greatly, because what I really had not done my research. It was very Victorian, my original design, and the witch's home is 360 years old, so it wasn't Victorian at all. But and that's where Bill Sendell, the great production designer that designed Hocus Pocus, did such an amazing job.
Wow, I want to go back to the story that you were telling to your children, because I find this really fascinating. And is this a story that was in your head and you would tell them as they were going to sleep, or is this something you actually wrote down as like a storybook? It
started as just me throwing some stuff out to them because Halloween was approaching, and it was time for bed, and I wanted them to go to bed. So here I'm going to tell them a story about witches sucking the lives out of children. And then as time went on, with that, very short time, I did put it down on paper. I remember on notebook paper with my little chicken scratch writing, and then Liz typed it up for me.
Wow! And now you have two girls. So was it important for you to have this story with 3 female leads, or actually 5 female leads?
As I said to you earlier in the broadcast, my dad died when I was young, so I had my mom, my sister, 2 female grandmothers, my favorite aunt. Now Liz is in my life. Very strong, driven women, and so the first thing I ever did, this rose petal piece that Jim Henson was so kind to me with Hallmark on. That was a microcosm of a female society within a garden. So I think that's always spoken to me. And even as a little kid, I was terrible, as I continue to be, at sports. But I loved, so I really didn't love hanging out with the guys as much because you were kind of judged by that. But I loved hanging out with the girls.
Okay.
And I just seemed to, it wasn't about crushes or anything else. It was just about, not being quite as wild, I think, as a lot of the guys, and feeling more comfortable in that.
I love it. Now, this pitch was in what year? What year did Disney buy this movie from you?
84.
1984, and the movie comes out in 1993.
Right, 9 years later.
That's incredible too. Like did you think the film was dead? You must have at some point just been like,
I did.
I got my paycheck for the story, and
well, barely that, but yes. When they bought it, Stephen had not quite bought An American Tail yet.
Okay.
So I had nothing to stand on, and they, as any studio will do, took complete advantage of that. And I think gave me a check for $150,000 for the rights to it all, and it's theirs, But it was, in retrospect, it was fantastic that I did that, because so here I had Steven saying yes to Hocus Pocus. I had American Tail, sorry. Then there was Hocus Pocus at Disney, and it immediately made me flavor of, it wasn't even the month, but maybe the year. There was Spielberg Pixie Dust to me, and people wanted a piece of that, and every door opened because of that. Whether fairly or not, the door opened because of Steven's name and anything that he felt strongly about everybody else. It's a heat-seeking missile business, and he was a mighty nuclear missile.
Yeah, it's incredible. I've heard you say several times that the original story for Hocus Pocus was much darker than what it ended up being on screen. So I'm curious. Obviously, when Disney showed interest, you're like, yes, please. But were you thinking of a different studio since you were trying to create something much darker that Disney wouldn't even...
I wasn't clever enough, honestly. Okay. I hadn't had enough experience. The fact that anybody was interested in anything that I had to say was thrilling to me. And like yourself, anything Disney was just thrilling to me. I didn't think, oh my gosh, is Disney going to just really try to make this... soften this up too much. There were plenty of fights with Jeffrey Katzenberg, but I will tell you, any of the knife wounds that I have were always in my chest with him. They were never in my back, and I always really respected that a great deal about him. As many times as I may have been near tears because he could be a rough guy, I really appreciated just how upfront and honest he was about everything.
Yeah, that's yes. A front stab is much better than a back stab, I will say.
Still hurts, right?
Yeah, it still hurts. Now, one of the most famous scenes, I think, arguably, in Hocus Pocus is one that you had a little convincing had to take place before you said yes to I Put a Spell on You.
Everybody's favorite scene. Sorry. Everybody's favorite scene. My own family's favorite scene. And when Jeffrey said that they were going to do a musical in the center, put a big song for Bette Midler in the middle of this, I said, you can't do that. This is an adventure story. Every minute means something, and here they're going to just burst into song. And he said, no, we're going to come up with something that makes the song a device that is part of the story. And I was trying to even comprehend what that meant. But Kenny and he, and I feel pretty strongly it was Kenny's idea, and it's everybody's favorite moment in the film. And I look at it now and I love it, but I was sure it ruined the film. I was positive it ruined the film, and I just could not see why you would stop a movie and break into song and dance when there's so much at stake. And of course, the reason for it's a spell, and it's the reason that people love Bette for a reason. She's got a great voice. She's a great personality. She's a presence. And Kenny just saw that and harnessed that into this screaming Jay Hawkins song of I Put a Spell on You. And as is, the backup singers, just the idea of the sisters, it's hysterical. And it's not so hard to say, I'm the first to admit that now because everybody loves it, but it's a showstopper. And Kenny was the vision for that 1,000%.
At what point did you realize, this works? Like, was it tests? Were you seeing screenings?
Yeah, we went to a test screening at the El Capitan, and the audience went insane through the whole film. but that they just applauded wildly at the end. And when I saw Jeffrey Katzenberg after, he threw his hands out as to hug me, which is something he generally does not do. And he said, "Buddy, we did it." And it just like, I wanted to climb into his arms and just be held by him because it felt so good to hear him say that. But, that really was not indicative of how the film would be overall received that dangerous summer of Jurassic Park.
Yes, which we will get to. But I find that so fascinating. There wasn't anything in Bette Midler's contract that was like, oh, there needs to be a musical number. There wasn't.
I never saw her contract, so I don't know. But she did plenty of movies that had no singing.
Yeah.
None at all. First Wives Club. The other one where she was Desperate People, where she was kidnapped. So many movies.
She was doing a ton for Disney at that point, under the whole Touchstone branch. Unbelievable. Now, obviously, you have a huge love of Halloween, but I think Hocus Pocus is the first time you went to Salem, Massachusetts. Is that correct?
That was my very first time, and I felt like a kid going to Disneyland for the first time, to be able to go there and to see what I had seen in books and just kind of an East Coast vibe that's where you're from, so you know. Just the idea of doors on houses painted different colors and near Marblehead, and it just, my family's from the East Coast originally, and in a perfect world, I would live back there. But it just spoke to me, and it was just so exciting to be surrounded by things that had only been in books that had inspired me to create many things growing up.
Was there anything in Salem that once you got there, you were like, oh, we need to do this now in the picture because of, I don't know, was there anything that just inspired you to make changes?
The whole sequence in the old graveyard, that when Max has his shoes stolen by Jay and Ice, and there's a beautiful church out looking over the city, and all the leaves are changing, and there's all these magnificent headstones from, early 1700s. And that's when when we did that location scout of Kenny and I and Bill Sandell, we just looked at each other and said, we've got to use this.
Yeah.
And it was incredible.
When did you shoot? Because it was all real autumn, right? You guys didn't set dress autumn.
We did do some set dressing, but like today you would use CGI to make those trees magnificent. For instance, there's a magnificent tree that, again, the genius of Bill Sandell, our production designer, when Allison hands Max Dennison a note as if she's interested in him. And when he looks at it, it's just his phone number that he had given her in his class when he was trying to act all cool. But she's wearing a red coat and with a hood on it. And she puts the hood over her head and walks away. And this tree is just lit with every shade of orange and red. And it brought tears to my eyes that Bill could have that kind of vision to bring it. But I think a lot of those leaves were glued on to that tree.
Oh, okay. So it was a very specific decision. You mentioned a little earlier now, it was the summer of Jurassic Park that this movie came out, July of 1993.
Did not even cross my mind, by the way. Excited to see Jurassic Park. Never thought, wow, that film may hurt us. I just thought, wow.
I mean, let's even just get rid of Jurassic Park. Let's just talk about July for Hocus Pocus.
Which is a weird time, right?
Do you have any idea what the reasoning was for that?
I think now that time has gone on, because that same year, Nightmare Before Christmas came out. Is that right? 1993?
I think you may be right, but was it the same? It was later.
It was later. It was fall.
Oh, you're saying they wanted that as their Halloween
I think they wanted that as their Halloween movie. They didn't want to sit on this.
Was that 93? Or was that like 92?
I don't know. As we sit here.
Oh, goodness.
I'm embarrassed, but I should know. But I think it came out at least pretty close, within a year, if not.
Okay.
And but nonetheless, the argument was because I was pleading with them to release it like at the end of September.
Yeah.
And they said kids are in school, which is true.
We still have weekends to go to the movies.
Well, I guess they felt that would not be strong enough.
Oh, man.
And so they released it then, and it seemed like and especially when the reviews came out, a combination of mixed reviews at best, and that time of year kind of felt like it was being dumped. And I think everybody just kind of didn't pay much attention to it because of that.
It drives me, and I will admit, I was 11 years old in 1993. I did not see Hocus Pocus in theaters back then. I saw it.
I think most of our audience did not. I think they originally saw it on a VHS.
Disney Channel was a huge thing for it.
And then Disney Channel is where it exploded.
Back in the big Blockbuster video days, I can vividly remember seeing that VHS tape on the shelf. And yeah, it's a weird thing, but it's kind of incredible to think that. I mean, can we call it a flop? Was it a flop?
I've called it that, and people have said to me that I am incorrect by that. It certainly wasn't anywhere near the league of being a hit and much closer to a flop. We kind of limped to first base. I think we made $30-something million. And I think the studio lost money on it.
Ugh.
And again, the reviews, it's probably the worst reviewed film of my career. And yet...
it's the one we're talking about 25 years later.
And yes, it's the one that we are talking about 25 years later and continues to grow and build an audience of new generations every generation. I always want to pinch myself, and I feel like it's the day after the film has come out to weak reviews and feeling like this has all been a dream in my head.
It's incredible.
These last 25 years.
So, of course, Winifred Sanderson is Bette Midler to a lot of people at this point, but I know that it wasn't necessarily the one you had in mind when creating this role.
No, I mean, Bette, was a giant A-list star, and I wanted someone that had name recognition. I wanted someone that had, enormous talent. And for me, that amazing woman was Cloris Leachman, who had been on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, who was part of the players of Mel Brooks and his movies. And she was just so funny and clever. And I saw her as Frau Blucher in Young Frankenstein. By the way, I'm sure most people don't know this. I only know this because my grandmother spoke Yiddish, and every time Frau Blucher would say her name in the movie, a horse would whinny.
Yep.
And the reason for that is Blucher means glue factory. Mm-hmm. And I became that much funnier, but that's Mel Brooks. He hides things and puts things that you have to dig for. But I just thought she was so brilliant in that. And so that's who I wasn't dreaming on the level of a Bette Midler, but she changed that whole role. I mean, she made it hers, and she made it, that character is defined by, such a personality. I mean, the way Johnny Depp is Jack Sparrow. I mean, she is Winifred Sanderson because her personality is so much like Winifred. She's so quick-witted, and Johnny's personality is pretty close to that of Jack Sparrow.
Yeah. Did you have anybody in mind that you were thinking about for Sarah and Mary as well?
I didn't.
No,
I did not. It was the lead that I was thinking. If I did, whoever that was, I've forgotten, but I don't think I did. Yeah. And again, it would be 9 years. So, whoever I was thinking would have been that much older.
Yeah. Interesting. One of my favorite things about that film is some of the flying stunts in that film, which I think the women did for the most part themselves, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, there's a puppet used in one scene when, in Max's bedroom, when the tower that's in his bedroom, there's a little observation deck that you go up a flight of stairs that explodes and the witches fly out. And that was done with 3 puppets that were made, that the Disney geniuses, Imagineers did that. And then there's a beautiful long shot of them flying over Salem with the moon and Salem below with the lights, and it's just magnificent.
Yeah, but all of that close-up flying work blows my mind every time I see it. Like I call it choreography. It's some of the most beautiful flying choreography I've ever seen.
It's absolutely, and they had to rehearse for that, and it's not comfortable being up there, and you're on a thin wire, and it's they're seat belted in that you can't see, but it's still. I was scared every time. I was scared, that these women would hurt themselves, or when the kids were being held by Thora Birch in the graveyard sequence, and Omri Katz when he's fighting with her. I was so frightened something would happen, but. Yeah, Disney knows what they're doing.
Yeah, one of my. This is so nerdy. Sorry, I'm going off on this, but I love the moment when Sarah lands after singing the song, and she lands in front of the house and then starts walking toward the front door. It is one of the most beautiful flight landings I've ever seen in my life.
I don't know if she ever studied dance. She looks like she has.
Oh, she was a musical theater kid.
Okay.
So she was Annie on Broadway.
Oh, that's right.
So yeah.
Well, yeah. When her foot just hits the ground, it's just like she's taking a step. It's beautiful and smooth. I love that you even notice that. That's what I love about you. You notice all of those things.
I'm a weird kid.
That's why we've become friends.
Well, I need to talk about something now that I don't know how much you can talk about. So if you can't, just say so. But of course, there has been the announcement that there is another Hocus Pocus film being worked on. Disney originally announced it and kind of made it sound like a remake. At this point on Wikipedia, they're calling it Hocus Pocus 2: Rise of the Elder Witch. I don't know if that's actually truthful or what you can say, but let's get into it a little.
Disney does not want me to talk about this.
Okay.
I
don't say anything that's going to get you in trouble.
The only thing I will say is that I think in the next few years, fans are going to be very excited as to stuff that is
brewing.
Brewing
is
That's
the perfect
best way
word,
to say
isn't
that.
it?
Brewing, yes.
Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that then, because I would love to dig, but I
hope silence says a lot there, because we're excited.
So I also want to mention, we're in your lovely house right now, and you like to collect some things, and this being a Disney podcast, you have some pretty cool Disney collectibles. I want to talk about your Dopey for a second, because you have a dummy Dopey, essentially, that a ventriloquist would use.
Exactly. And when you think about that longer than I did when I bought it at an antique toy show, you will say, wait a minute, why would someone make a ventriloquist puppet of a character that doesn't speak? And the answer may be because so any kid can do it. I'm not sure. But the more I thought about it when I was driving away and it hit me, oh my God, what did I just do? The more excited I was by the fact of that's got to be one of the most weirdest, wonderful concepts in the world. And now I have this character. When I showed it to Becky Klein, who is she's the head archivist for the Disney Studios, and a brilliant and really nice person, she had never even heard of it. And I was shocked by that. I believe it's a Bob Barker marionette, and Bob Barker made all kinds of things for Disney. But maybe it was just a prototype, and they said, are you crazy? The character doesn't speak. But somehow someone got it, and 80 years later sold it, and I was fortunate enough to buy it.
Do you have any other Disney collectibles that are like among your favorites?
I do. I have something that was made, I think her name was Charlotte Clark, and she had the license to make to make Mickey dolls, and she would make them on her breakfast room table. Well, when Mickey exploded, she could not keep up with it and said to Kay Kamen, who was in charge of all Disney merchandise from the very beginning, I can't do this. I can't keep up with this. And so he took her license and gave it to the Knickerbocker Toy Company. But I have one of her original Mickeys that she made off of her kitchen table with Walt Disney's approval. And Liz and I bought that about 27 years ago, and it's in our collection of Disney stuff. It's from about 1929.
That's incredible. Do you have something signed by Walt as well?
I do. I have the book. The book is it was a book on Fantasia. Came out in 1949, and it's signed by Walt Disney to a boy named Scott, and signed in that magnificent Disney script that just makes all of our minds explode with happiness when we look at it, and for whatever reason makes me hungry because I think of Disneyland and I want to go eat things there.
Churro time.
Yes.
I want to now mention something it's not Disney specific, but my listeners would be very disappointed with me if I didn't bring it up because it has a tie to Rick Moranis, whom I adore specifically and most especially from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Sure.
But I'm going to jump back a while here because you mentioned how you used to go collect artwork from the dumpsters of Hanna-Barbera.
I would ride my faux Schwinn bike. The only thing that was Schwinn about it was the banana seat. It was a regular bike, and I'm sure I looked ridiculous, but that's all we could afford. And I would ride my bike up to Hanna-Barbera and dumpster dive. I was like 14, and I would go through and I would just collect all kinds of cells and drawings. Didn't matter if they were crumpled up, all of this stuff. And it's obviously ironic because years later I would wind up working there.
Yeah, what was your position? First of all, do you still have some of that stuff you collected?
I do. My son-in-law, I gave him my whole collection of Disney and Hanna-Barbera and Jay North and all my whole animation collection. I have a couple pieces left, but it's in their house in their family room now. But
yeah, so at Hanna-Barbera, you were in charge of everything.
Hanna-Barbera, yeah, I guess. I was chairman of the company. I started off as president, which is weird in itself because the only other job that I'd ever had was working at Tower Records when I went to college. And then I worked for myself as a producer. And then I get a job that I even got vacation time on. No one had ever given me that before, which I never took. I always say it's great to grow up and get paid for what you got in trouble for as a little kid.
Yeah,
and that is creating monsters and characters and writing when I should be paying attention to what was going on in school. And I was just kind of lost in my world.
What years were you there?
I was there from 1989 to 1995.
So you were there. Were you there for like a Yabba Dabba Doo and Holly Rockabye Baby and all that stuff? Or was you don't even remember? Sorry, I'm a big Flintstones fan.
I know those titles. I'm just trying to remember if I was there for that.
Because I feel like that was a big time period for Hanna-Barbera.
God, you don't remember what year that was?
I don't. It was the 90s. It might have been later though. You were there for the film, for the live action movie.
The live action film, which I called Steven and said, "Are you interested in doing a Flintstones film?" And he said, "Yeah."
Which was another one that didn't review well.
It didn't review well.
I love it.
And people seem to love it. The audience response to it is very high. At the time, it made $350-something million. I mean, it was a huge hit. I wasn't part of the second one, but that was great, and it was an exciting time because we won over those years. We won about 24 Emmys for the studio, and just kind of brought life back into the studio with old stuff as well as new stuff, which is where Rick Moranis comes in.
Exactly. So that's where Rick Moranis comes in the live-action Flintstones movie where he plays Barney Rubble. And I just need to ask, are there any Rick Moranis stories? He seems like a pretty quiet guy in general.
He's a quiet, kind guy that is the most amazing father. And when his wife, I believe Nancy was her name, I'm not sure about that, passed away, he just stopped acting to raise his children, to stay on the East Coast and raise his children. He was born in Canada, but I so loved working with him.
Well, these have been awesome stories. Thank you so much for sharing them. Before we go, I do want to mention to the people listening that we actually have a pretty exciting event coming up pretty soon. At Midsummer Scream, we're part of a panel called We Put a Spell on You, celebrating 25 years of Hocus Pocus. So if you listeners want to hear more Hocus Pocus stuff, because there is a lot more to share, you should come check that out on July 29th in Long Beach, California. So, of course, I'll be at Midsummer Scream, you'll be at Midsummer Scream, and we've got Mick Garris joining us, who
Mick Garris wrote the screenplay on Hocus Pocus. He started with Spielberg as well, and he started as the story editor on Amazing Stories. and he's done so much over the years. He's truly considered one of the masters of horror.
I saw him in a documentary recently that I was watching that. You know the documentary about the Hitchcock shower scene in Psycho? It's called 5274 or something like that. It's 2 numbers. And I'm just sitting there watching. I'm like, hey, it's Mick. I know that guy.
He's called in on everything, and because people are fascinated to know his perspective on things that go bump in the night, and no one does it better.
Yeah. And Tony Gardner will be joining us.
Tony Gardner, the brilliant special effects guy that brought Billy to life and made Bette Midler's teeth and made the girls old when that was necessary. He also has made Chucky move for us for the last near 30 years as well.
Incredible. John Debney will be joining us.
John Debney, the great John Debney, Academy Award nominee, Emmy-winning composer who just made Hocus Pocus soar with his amazing score.
And, of course, Thora Birch will be joining us.
And Thora, who is a dear friend, and just, to me, one of the most remarkable people that I know, because she's so bright and has such an amazing gift. And it just, here I met this girl when I was, I was about 34, 35, and she was 8 years old. And yet today, she and her fiance are very dear friends of my wife and I. And, I love this girl like a daughter. She's amazing. And she's the center point of Hocus Pocus. I mean, just the idea, her relationship with Thackeray Binks, and she just brings it home. She still makes me cry at the end of that movie every time as she's crying over the cat, and then her joy to see the spirit has been released and is going to heaven with his sister. Every time. I've seen this movie 10,000 times. Her performance makes me cry every time.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking really forward to Midsummer Scream. If you folks would like to join us, head to midsummerscream.org. It is July 28th and 29th, although our panel is on the Sunday date, the 29th. And if you do get tickets, put in code word HOCUS for 25% off general admission. David, thank you so much for coming on Disney Coast to Coast.
Thank you so much. I love this, and I love having you as my friend because we have so much in common. We would have built great tree houses when we were 10 together.
We would have gotten into a lot of trouble, I think, and especially on Halloween.
Especially on Halloween.
And before we get going, I want to remind all of you that every day on Instagram Live, you can be part of the Daily Disney Decision. Be sure to follow DIZNEYCTC on Instagram to be part of that, and all of our social media can be found over at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. And don't forget to leave those 5-star reviews and ratings on iTunes to help other Disney fans find the show more easily. But for now, have a magical day, everybody. Bye!
Thanks for watching Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePaoli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com.